Mystical doorbell. My husband Vitaly and I are avid tourists. Even before the wedding, we toured all the foreign resorts available to ordinary people. And after we got married, for some reason we were drawn to the so-called domestic tourism. We began to explore the tourist attractions of our own country. The service, of course, is worse, but the costs are less, and there is no torture at airports. We, like many other tourists, were very interested in all sorts of haunted houses and castles, mystical stories about them. We have visited both England and Italy, in those places where, according to promotional travel brochures, you can meet ghosts, but nowhere have we seen anything so supernatural. The usual, standard tourist service comfort, souvenirs, coffee. Of course, it's all fun, interesting and delicious, but a chill does not run down my back. The summer before last, my husband and I went on a trip by car again in the midst of an abnormal heat wave. This time we decided to admire the chalk mountains, which are located near Voronezh. Great idea. City amenities are within reach. Nature is fantastic. Climate and time zone are completely familiar. Our trip, despite the heat, took place in a surprisingly pleasant and easy environment. We got to the right place without any problems. We decided not to stay at the hotel. I wanted to be closer to nature. Instead, they asked to spend the night in villages that came across on the way. There are many of them near Voronezh, and so, in one half-abandoned, but very picturesque village, we were informed that there was a vacant house, which the owners, friendly people, would be happy to put at our disposal for a few days. It did not even occur to me that just a few minutes away from the modern city of 1 million people there are places where water is taken from a well, and amenities in the yard. But at that moment it seemed very attractive to me. Such a striking contrast with the usual city life. One day we spent the whole day on the breathtakingly beautiful chalk cliffs. As messages from the Ministry of Emergency Situations began to arrive on the phones about an approaching thunderstorm, I decided not to take any chances and asked my husband to return to our farm. We managed to get home just in time. The first thunderclaps were already thundering, and lightning was blazing. The sky quickly darkened, a strong wind rose. We closed the shutters just in case and started cooking dinner. Then a terrible thunderstorm broke out. At first, the rain drummed furiously on the roof, but then the downpour subsided, and the sounds of rain turned into a soothing rustle. We went to bed. Suddenly, an insistent knock on the door pulled me out of a pleasant slumber. I got up, went to the door, opened it. No one, just a pall of rain. I went back to bed. A couple of minutes later, the knock was repeated. I opened it again. Again, no one. But in the stream of rain jets, it seemed to me that I saw some kind of shaky figure of a woman. "What do you need?" I asked rather angrily. There is no answer. I'm back again. The knock was repeated a third time. Now I'm really angry. Stop hooliganism, I shouted to the vague, misty figure. I went back to bed again. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang insistently. "Well, that's enough," said Vitaly. "Now I'm going to ask this joker." He picked up the stove poker, moved to the door, and suddenly froze halfway there. The door continued to be knocked insistently, and the bell rang from the ringing. "There's no doorbell here," Vitaly said in amazement. These words made my skin crawl. I was so scared that I jumped out of bed and rushed to my husband to hide behind his broad back. And as soon as I ran up to him, there was a deafening clap of thunder. The window above the bed shattered, and a huge fragment of a smoldering tree trunk fell on the place where we should have been lying. It turned out that lightning struck an old apple tree growing next to the house. We stood hugging each other and shaking with horror. There was another soft knock on the door. We, holding each other, cautiously looked out. There was no one on the porch. To whom and for what we owed this mystical salvation still remains a mystery, but we are grateful for it to this day. Scary story, night knock. When I was a child, my family and I went to visit my grandmother in the village every year. Grandmother often told mystical stories that happened to her throughout her life in the countryside. I decided to share some of them. Today I'm going to tell you probably the most creepy and memorable. The events in question took place in the 60s of the 20th century with my grandmother and her family. Next, I will tell you on behalf of my grandmother. I'll start with the background. After finishing 7 classes and a pedagogical school, I came to the village to teach physical education to children. I was a very young girl. I remember that the guys I taught lessons with were the same age as me. They winked at me, called me on dates, but I understood my responsibility as a teacher, and I did not flirt with school children. In the first year of my life in the village, I met Misha, my future husband. He was almost 10 years older, a tractor driver, a merry fellow, the first guy in the village, the son of the chairman. He immediately set his eye on me. All my girlfriends and family were delighted. "Marry a bear. You will be happy," they said. Happiness did not happen in the end, but this is not about that. Misha turned away all the suitors from me, threatened them with knives and a gun, did not let anyone in. There was a case. On my next refusal, he shot at me. Missed. It just so happened that I eventually married him. Not out of love, but because my parents told me to. I moved home to his parents. He continued to work as a tractor driver, and our son Yura was born. Immediately after the wedding, our parents bought us a plot of land with an old wooden house, sold by relatives of my grandmother, who used to live there. The house was demolished in a matter of days and the construction of a new one began. Almost completely the house was built by my father. It was a sturdy brick house with a kitchen, a corridor, a large hallway that was also a dining room, 3 rooms, 2 of which were walk-throughs, and a large attic. The only trouble was that there was no electricity. We spent it much later. There were 2 doors in the house, one entrance, lockable. She let me into the corridor. The second door connected the corridor and the rest of the rooms, and was also locked. The day came when our family moved into their own house. We, as expected, launched the kitty and were preparing to spend the first night there. Our bedroom was behind 2 doors. In the last non-passable room, little Yura slept with us. Then the nightmare began. My husband and I woke up at the same time. The front door was knocked out. Someone was breaking in the middle of the night. We heard splinters flying. It seemed like the whole house was shaking. It seemed like another blow and the door would fly off its hinges, but it held on. As you may have already realized, my husband is a sharp man, and he was probably more angry that he was woken up than scared. I was terrified. He grabbed knives from the kitchen, opened the door to the corridor and started shouting with a good obscenity that he would kill everyone now. Looking out the window, we didn't see anyone. The knocking stopped. The husband decided that someone was messing around and, swearing loudly, went to sleep further. As soon as we lay down, the knocking resumed again. We'd heard the door being torn out of its place again, by the sound of it. Nothing should have been left. It seems that then the husband was scared. He grabbed the knives again and started shouting, looking out the window. We didn't see anyone again. The knocking stopped. We didn't sleep all night. The situation was repeated time after time. It was scary to go out. We lit a kerosene lamp and sat in the corridor until dawn, when the devilry stopped. In the morning we cautiously went out on the porch in search of traces of the night visitor, but found nothing. The door, from which only splinters should have remained, was unharmed. That day, thanks to a sleepless night, both fell asleep at work. But what to do when such things happen? They didn't tell anyone. The next night we waited with fear and hoped that the trouble would pass. We went to bed quietly. I believed that nothing terrible would happen today. We woke up at the same time. Someone was breaking down our door again. I was shaking. It was wildly scary. Misha took up knives again. It seems that this time he was very confident in his abilities. Having opened the first door, he went to the second, cursing the uninvited guest on the move, promising to kill him right on his porch. Opening the second door, we saw only an empty threshold and, without a single chip and scratch, the door. After closing both doors, we returned to the bedroom. No sooner had we got under the blanket, the knocking started again. But now it was at the second door. It went in. It was inside. I was shivering. I was crying. Misha was swearing at the top of his lungs. But he understood that knives would not help him. The area of knocking grew, so it knocked on one door, so it knocks on both. Soon the knocking went under the floor, It broke the floorboards that my father carefully laid. Visually, nothing was visible, everything was intact, but this did not calm down, but only scared even more. The inability to understand and deal with the source of the knocking was maddening. Misha opened the first door, to the sound of the house flying apart. He opened the second one, kicked me out into the street with the child, told me to go to his mother, who lived so close, which I, not without argument, did. I refused to return to that house. Religion was not particularly respected then. Children were baptized secretly, but some churches worked. My husband's mother advised me to ask the priest to consecrate the house. While we were waiting for him, we lived with Misha's mother. A week later, the priest came and did everything he was supposed to. We drove into the house again. It was scary, but it never happened again. A mysterious knock on the door. It was late at night and the rain was pounding on the windows of the house. I was sitting by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, reading a book, when suddenly there was a mysterious knock on the door. My cat, Mirka, jumped up and froze. Her fur stood on end. I immediately felt goosebumps on my skin. Surprisingly, I wasn't expecting guests and wasn't expecting a single soul at this time of night. The knocking was so clear, as if someone had knocked hard with a bone. Mirka purred and ran away, disappearing into the dark corners of the room. My heart was pounding like crazy, but I resolutely got up from the chair and began to approach the door. The knock sounded a second time, but this time it was barely audible, like a whisper. Taking hold of the door handle, I felt the cold that came from behind the door, and this inspired me with even more fear. I cautiously opened the door, and a dark, ominous night appeared in front of me. The rain was pouring down like a bucket, and the mist was tightly enveloping the house. Nothing was visible on the street. Suddenly I saw something strange. Through the impenetrable darkness, in the distance, stood the figure of a man. It was a shadow, like a ghost, and it was slowly moving towards me. My heart almost stopped, and I stepped back, closing the door. There was another knock coming through the door, louder and more insistent this time. I watched through the peephole in the door, but saw nothing but darkness and rain. Mirka came back, purred again and hid under the bed. Fear took hold of me, and I didn't know what to do. There was another knock, and it sounded like someone had hit the door hard. Everything inside me said that it was dangerous to open the door, but I felt that I needed to find out who was behind it. Approaching the door again, I cautiously opened it and stepped into the darkness. My breath was coming out of my mouth, and I stepped forward. Suddenly, something brushed past me with a screech. I turned around, but I didn't see anything. When I turned on the flashlight, the light flashed in my eyes. In front of me stood a figure covered with a black cloak and with a hood covering his face. Her eyes were red, and they were looking at me with terrifying intensity. The figure whispered something incomprehensible, like a spell, and I felt my head begin to spin. At that moment, I felt her rise into the air, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in my bed. Everything was as usual, but the fear I experienced is still alive in my memory. I do not know if it was a real experience or a nightmare, but a knock on the door and a mysterious figure left a mark on me that I will never forget.